Hola fellow sapiens. So this is the second part of the series of the video on gender-based violence against women, and I'm going to read from the same book called Freedom from Violence, which is edited by Margaret Schuler. And before I start doing that, I would like to raise some questions that I've jotted in myself when I created them regarding this issue, and it's like a thought to ponder on as well for the viewers, and it defines the values of this channel as well, and then how do we perceive to become a changed personality which is more empathetic and sentient towards women and towards all living beings on planet Earth. So the question is, why is gender-based violence so embedded in our society and culture? And thought to ponder on is, why can't we view women as humans possessing an individual existence, and why is there always a need to associate their body, movement, their rights with culture, society, family, and the values and integrity of the state? So I'm going to start off with where I left, from the word sacrosanct. I'm going to reread that very same para. So here it goes. Most societies regard the family as sacrosanct, not to be interfered with by outside individuals or by the states, and the affairs of family members as private. Under a regime of unequal gender relations, women are at a clear disadvantage. Even in societies possessing equality of all citizens, traditional values often undermine formal affirmations of equality. The legal system. The law plays a critical role in sustaining or changing attitudes and practices related to gender violence. Law plays the dual role of reflecting fundamental social values and defining or shaping them. Law defines rape and other forms of gender violence in accord with society's view about women, traditionally as subordinate to and the property of women. This is the basic wrong that is there with the legal system all around the world. Enforcement and adjudication of these laws by the justice system through the police, prosecutors, and the court also mirror these values. Because law reflects social values, laws can be changed to create new behavioral norms reflecting new values about women. All programmatic response to gender violence address one or all of these areas. Number one, the needs of the victim. Number two, the social values that justify violent behavior towards women. And three, the socio-legal system charged with protecting the rights of the innocent and sanctioning the guilty. So I'm going to go towards three case studies from three different countries, which includes Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and India. And then I'm going to go about another part of the videos and other case studies that are a part of it. There are in total of 13 of them, and they reflect different forms of gender violence inflicted upon women, and what systems do they have, and the problems and limitations and drawbacks of those existing systems, and how those cultures define gender-based violence as well, and define women in their societal values. It's going to be from page 49. So yeah, it's the first one, Sri Lanka. The chapter is titled as "Of Kali Born: Women, Violence and the Law in Sri Lanka." Radhika Kumaraswamy. Kali is the goddess of retributive justice. Professor Gananath of Iskere, interviewing women who go to the goddess with their problem, asked them why they did not find redress in the court of law. They looked bewildered. The goddess would understand their problems, but a code of law, well, they were not so sure. Adrienne Reach, the well-known feminist poet, writes, throughout patriarchal mythology, dream symbolism, theology, language, two ideas flow side by side. One, that female body is impure, corrupt, the site of discharges, bleeding, dangerous to masculinity, a source of moral or physical contamination, the devil's way. On the other hand, as mothers, the woman, beneficent, sacred, pure, asexual, nourishing, and the physical potential for motherhood. That same body, with its bleeding and mysteries, is her single destiny and justification in life. In order to maintain two such notions, each in its contradictory purity, the masculine imagination has had to divide women to see us and force us to see ourselves as polarized into good and evil, fertile or barren, pure or impure. Such drastic distinctions. The law is no exception. This is particularly evident in the approach of law to violence towards women. The chaste virgin or mother has to be protected. The impure, independent woman has to be shamed. The dichotomy of perception will help us understand many of the law's attitude and many of the reasons why the law has failed to give redress to women who are victims of violence. Women are singled out for violent treatment for a variety of reasons. First, because of women's sexuality and gender, she is susceptible to rape, female circumcision or genital mutilation, female infanticide, and sex-related crimes. These are fundamentally connected to a society's construction of female sexuality and its role in social hierarchy. Second, a woman is subject to violence because of her relationship to a man, domestic violence, dowry death, sati, crime of honor, etc. These are animated by a society's concept of women as the property and dependent of male protector, first her father and then her husband. Third, violence is directed against women because of the social group to which she belongs. In times of war, riot, class, and caste violence, women are victims of violence and rape because to rape a woman is to humiliate her community. Again, this is linked to the male perceptions of female sexuality and women as the property of another man. To attack her is to exploit your enemy's vulnerability. Finally, there have been studies of the Nazi experience in Germany which has attempted to show that there is a correlationship between militarization and increased violence against special type of women. What does the law about these categories of violence against women? What does the law do about these categories of violence against women? The answer is very little. One main reason is the private-public distinction which pervades all aspects of the law. A man's home is his castle. The slogan must have been written by a male lawyer, for the law treats warily into private homes. The sanctity of the family, another slogan, is a very real obstacle in the case of women in violence. The basic assumption behind this approach is that what happens in the home is a private affair, and the law should only intervene if it becomes a public nuisance, such as when a woman cries hysterically through the night when her husband is beating her up, depriving her neighbors of sleep. The same is true about sexual relations between men and women. It is therefore not ironic that prostitution in Sri Lanka is controlled by the Vagrancy Ordinance, which is again an aspect of public nuisance. The purpose of this paper is not to present a comprehensive analysis of all of these type of crimes where a woman is victim, but to raise issues about the gaps in the law and its inadequacy to deal with many of the problems created by the nature of legal assumptions and the structure of the judicial system. The law and rape. Let us begin with an area where the law has actually tried to intervene, the area of rape. Section 364 of the Penal Code defines rape as sexual intercourse between a man and a woman without her consent or against her will. In addition, it specifies that intercourse with a girl under the age of 12 is rape, with or without her consent. Sri Lanka Penal Code, subsection 364. But what actually happens when the case comes to court? First, there is a general rule of thumb: no injury, no rape. The woman who is being raped must show utmost resistance to the point of risking her life, with some exceptions as in the case of blackmail, deception, or state of shock. But for the normal case, unless the woman has clawed or maimed her assailants, she had better not bring her case to court. Second, there is what Brenda Kosman calls a hierarchy of rape. If you're a girl under the age of 18 who was a virgin and was raped by a woman from a lower class or a minority race or caste group, then you can be sure to get a conviction. But if you're an independent lower class woman of middle age raped by an acquaintance, then it is better that you nurse your wounds at home. If you have had past sexual experiences and this experience has been with anyone except your husband, then the lawyer, the judge, and the jury will be made to believe that you asked for it. It's disturbing. Kamilini Vijayat Tilake, in her article A Social Legal Overview of Rape as a Form of Violence, gives abundant examples of Kosman's proposition in the Sri Lankan context. In Sri Lanka, the testimony of the victims need not to be corroborated in theory, but in actual fact, the court would caution the jury that it would be unsafe to act or on the uncorroborated evidence of the victim unless there is a corroboration of some material facts in the victim's evidence. However, in relation to crimes such as abduction, kidnapping, where the victim is not always female, corroboration is not required. Wow. She ends her discussion with an unreported case of a woman in the lower income group who went to a police officer and complained that when she went to a government office in search of an officer, she was raped by the security guards. The security guards, friends of the police officer, claimed that the woman was loitering, so they abused her and the woman was arrested under the vagrancy ordinance for prostitution. This is like, there is so much wrong with this perception of society is against that they have, not just towards the victim, it's the heinous act himself and the perpetrators who will, I mean, in what language should I explain this, that how does a woman ask for being raped? How does her dressing, walk, a movement, body movement, anything is asking for it? What morality do we teach? What morality do we preach in the first place? I don't think this is a moral value. These are not moral values. They're just like in direct contradiction and in conflict with the basic norms of liberty. And move on to this is about shame and vindication of rights. Anthropologists have recently separated society into litigious and shame-oriented societies. Litigious societies are those in which rights are forcefully vindicated in law courts or in the political process. Shame-oriented societies have a parallel code to the legal system, which condition responses in certain areas of social life. One may debate the validity of the distinction in terms of society, but there is no doubt that in the area of women and violence, shame is an important component. It prevents women from disclosing the truth and therefore prevents vindication of their rights under any legal system, no matter how progressive it may be in content and form. How does one tackle shame? For it runs deep, especially in small societies such as ours. In a film made by one of the ICES directors about illegitimacy, the women consented to talk about their problems only as long as the film was not shown in Sri Lanka. Shame will always be a factor that stands in the way of progress, and unless the community and the family become support bases, it is unlikely that it will disappear from our social life. A woman who is raped, violated, and maimed brings shame upon herself and her family. For many in traditional societies believe that she did not have the spiritual power to ward off evil. A woman is seen as a spiritual center. Violence in the family is an aspect of her failure to gain the blessings of God, as Yasmin Gunarat recounts in a poem. Betrayed by life into a loveless chamber, oh may my twitching hands that touch and pleasure nothing, my shaken gaze, leaping from emptiness to emptiness, my body shriveling quietly besides the aching cavern, where my soul stood, never reveal that there has taken place an act of violence. It's painful. So this is another one from Pakistan, age 63. The chapter is titled as Whose Laws? Human Rights and Violence Against Women in Pakistan. The test for the success of any administrative, political, or judicial system is the extent to which it effectively provides its people with security of their person and property, and how well it safeguards the right to life and liberty. Most constitutions contain these guarantees as fundamental right of the citizens. However, in practice, the exercise of these rights has always depended on the prevailing socio-economic factors and political conditions. Extreme poverty, deprivation, and social and economic oppressions increase the potential for the violation of human rights, as it is under these conditions that people lose the power to protest. If the situation fails to improve, then over a period of time, the society loses even the propensity to be outraged by the most brutal forms of abuse. They have come to the point where you're not even outraged by the last line that says, by the most brutal form of abuse. They've become numb. Violence against women. The situation in the developing world is made worse because of the belief among many that larger issues of survival requires more serious attention, and therefore action against gender violence take a lower priority. Another common response is that violence against women is a cultural, private, or individual issue and not a matter which can be remedied by a state action, thus relegating the issues to the dominion of social reform. Where available, statistics have shown that these responses are totally unjustified. Violence against women in all its manifestation is criminal and has resulted in death, physical incapacitation, mental derangement. Office statistics and survey data in the United States shows that domestic battery is the leading cause of injury among adult women, and rape is committed every 6 minutes. In France, 95% of the victims of violence are women. In India, 8 out of 10 wives are victims of violence. These numbers do not even reflect the full extent of the problem, since much of it remains hidden. The argument that violence is cultural or personal is erroneous. The issue is profoundly political and results from structural pattern of control and dominance of social institutions. The importance of this control is evident from the resistance to social change which endeavor to give more control to women through increased social participation. This goes to the heart of the problem. A perpetual fear of violence in the home, at work, or in the street minimizes this participation and is a major hindrance to women's development. The Mexican Federation of Women Trade Unions reports that 95% of the women workers are victims of sexual harassment and complains that the impunity of these crimes limits women's participation in the workplace. There have been reports of gang rape of women workers in India. Sexual harassment and exploitation of women workers in the free trade zone in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and other South and Southeast Asian countries have become matters of grave concern for regional women's groups. Legal barriers to combating violence against women. While it is not difficult to determine the root cause or the dimensions of violence against women, it has become extremely difficult to devise strategies for combating this violence. Both social censure and legislative restraints are necessary. However, existing legislation in most jurisdictions reflects negative social attitude which makes laws inadequate to deal with violence. Assault and battery are criminal offences in most jurisdictions and at least theoretically would be applicable to domestic violence as well. Yet in practice, battery of the wife is seen as a normal feature of domestic life and state intervention is discouraged. This is a reflection of societal attitude towards the abuse of women in a domestic context, which indicate acceptance of a certain level of violence in the family. In a jurisdiction where Islamic laws is practiced, it is generally accepted that the chastisement of recalcitrant women by their husband is permissible and is in fact necessary for the betterment of the society. This belief is based on the Quranic verse Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 34, which has been interpreted to mean that a husband is permitted to beat his wife, like legalizing it. This attitude is also reflected in judicial pronouncement on marital dispute. In a judgment by Pakistani court on a petition for habeas corpus filed on behalf of a woman who alleged cruel treatment including illegal confinement by her husband, the judge refused to issue the writ. The judge quoted from the Quran and held, a very important question arises for determination, namely whether a woman who is sui juris can be allowed to accompany her paramour in preference to her husband in the circumstances of this case. On the one hand, there is the fundamental right of the woman to be set at liberty, which appears to be on the other hand in direct conflict with a clear injunction of the Holy Quran. This positive injunction of the Holy Quran leaves one in no manner of doubt that under certain circumstances the husband can even go to the extent of giving a beating to his wife who persists in rebellious conduct. If in the exercise of a fundamental right of personal liberty she is allowed to make a choice, I am certain that she would go with the petitioner, her paramour. The two have collusively maneuvered to file this petition invoking the discretionary jurisdiction of this court. Under Islamic law, the respondent, being the husband of the woman, is entitled to her custody as her legal guardian. His right of guardianship, coupled with the liberty granted to him in the above quoted Quranic verse, cannot be allowed to be frustrated by such collusive circumvention. I am not therefore inclined to allow this petition. This case also illustrates how fundamental human rights can be restricted or denied in the circumstances applicable to women only. Domestic violence has taken the extreme form of dowry deaths both in India and Pakistan. The increasing number of incidents involving the killing of young brides by husband or the marital family for inadequate dowries have evoked strong reaction from women groups in India. The pressure exerted by these groups on the parliament resulted in an amendment of the Indian Penal Code. The intended outcome of this amendment is that if a woman dies an unnatural death under suspicious circumstances within a certain period after marriage, the husband and his family will come under interrogation. Whether or not this law has served as a deterrent to dowry death is difficult to ascertain because of the lack of statistical data. It is also not known how many cases have been prosecuted under this law. Concern over the increasing incidence of death of women by burning has been expressed by women rights groups in Pakistan for the past several years. The deaths are normally attributed to bursting of the stove used for cooking. Investigations are very rarely conducted, and the police filed the case with the report that death was due to an accident or suicide. This occurs even when a woman has made a dying declaration before the attending doctor that she has been burned by the husband or his family. The press has played an important role in raising questions and doubts about the methods of investigation in such cases and has created public awareness of the issue. The high number of these incidents is frightening. The women affected usually belongs to low-income group. Even if the cause of death is bursting of the stove, neglect on the part of the authority to bring the manufacturers of the defective and dangerous appliance to book is criminal. Women are considered expendable to the society, so the reaction to the death has been slow in coming. The High Court of Lahore has finally taken suo notice and has directed the police to file the case against manufacturer as well as interrogate the husband and his family in case of a death of a married woman. 76. So this is from the case study in India, which is titled as Stopping the Violence Against Women, 15 Years of Activism in India. Defining violence against women. Gender violence, like all other historical manifestation of violence, is embedded in the socio-economic and political context of power relations. It is produced within class, caste, and patriarchal social relations in which male power dominates. A narrow view of the violence may define it as an act of criminal use of physical force, but this is an incomplete concept. Violence also includes exploitation, discrimination, unequal economic and social structures, the creation of an atmosphere of terror, threat, and reprisals, and other forms of religio-cultural and political violence. While violence against women is a part of general violence found in social structures such as class, caste, religion, and ethnicity, and in the way the state controls people, it also encompasses aspects of structural violence and forms of control and coercion exercised through hierarchical and patriarchal gender relationships in the family and society. Women-specific violence functions to keep women where they are, that is, in the house and powerless. If we think this way, then there is nothing I can say the way we have shaped the society. Lacking resources and economically and emotionally dependent, women becomes instrument through which the social system reproduces itself and through which systematic inequality is maintained. Women are considered men's property, and their sexuality, fertility, and labor are systematically controlled. Violence against women and their submissions and subordinations further strengthened and maintained over time by socialization processes, through which the hierarchic gender relations of the familial structures offer women little or no independent social existence. These relations establish the possessional rights over women which men have as husbands or fathers or older male relations. Such possessional rights includes promise of protection, whether or not actually fulfilled in reality, in return for submission and exclusive use. In order to change the situation, women's access to resources is crucial. However, the state is not only tends to overlook these structural forms of violence against women, but perpetuates them in the name of cultural legitimacy and maintenance of law and order. Moreover, the coercive power of the state, police, and army often uses sexual violence against women in caste communal clashes and against women in police custody. There are many discriminatory laws that women find very difficult to fight. Agricultural laborers, poor peasants, Dalit, the oppressed caste, and the Adivasi, indigenous women have repeatedly questioned the Indian state for working in close alliance with patriarchal fundamentalist forces. The women in Nari Mukti Sangharsh Sammelan Struggle for Women's Liberation meeting passed the resolution in February 1988. Women face specific forms of violence, rape and other forms of sexual abuse, female infanticide, witch killing, sati, dowry murders, and wife beating. Such violence and the continued sense of insecurity that is instilled in women as a result keep them bound to the home, economically exploited, and socially suppressed. In the ongoing struggles against women in the family, society, and the state, we recognize that the state is one of the main perpetrators of violence by men against women in the family, the workplace, and the neighborhood. For these reasons, the mass women movement should focus its efforts both inside and outside the home. It's actually really disturbing reading all this forms of violence that are perpetrated all over the regions in the world, and they're indoctrinated and embedded in our society and cultures for centuries and thousands of years of I mean, like, what I think about it, why don't we have a documented history of female philosophers the same way we have for Aristotle and other philanthropists and Socrates and other people? Why aren't women made part of these political discussions? This has always been this way, this cultural society and in this indoctrination that has been part of the history, that it has always been male dominated. So it's only appropriate that you'll create a society that doesn't even resonate with the perception of women as an individual existence, because their opinions don't matter. They were never documented, they were never heard, they were never made part of an observatory mechanism when you're creating a society or a community. So my thought to ponder is that this is what needs to change. There is a huge embrace that is need to be done in terms of accepting women as individuals, that their existence do matter, their voice matters, their opinion matters. There are many issues that are specifically, they pertain and they're particular to women, and only they can voice about them, they can experience those things, and they can resolve those problems. So their resolution, their opinion, their reflection matters to create a harmonic society. I'd like to sign off with this, and for my viewers to think about it. It's a thought to ponder on. Ciao, sapiens.